Hey there everybody, it's Eternal Snowman here with another TLT recap and analysis video. This time going over round 3 recap and round 4 predictions. So we're going to be talking a little bit about all of the round 3 matchups and round 4. Before I begin, I want to make some kind of overarching points. So I would say this week we had a lot of cheese teams, especially in OU and NU, and also a lot of UU teams and RU teams also seem to have a lot of cheese. And what I mean by cheese is they met like hyper offense and screens offense was a very common occurrence throughout the course of most of these games. So if you are looking for kind of team advice, be wary of that, especially looking at team replays of who your opponent is in the next or in this round. You'll probably notice that a lot of them will be using cheese, especially like some of the notable ones like Team Charm had loaded up a lot of cheese. A lot of the lower end brackets players as well ended up loading up a lot of cheese. So when you're preparing for your opponent, be sure to keep that in mind. Bringing stuff like unaware mons or other Pokemon like that can actually answer some of those extremely dangerous sweepers, especially like for example Blaziken and UU, stuff like Pheromosa and OU, and Rillaboom and that kind of stuff. Like common like sweepers that are being used a lot. Be sure you can answer cheese in any tier that you play. Um, so basically, everyone who wins in the 2-0 bracket has already qualified, so their seeding basically doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter how they do in the remaining 2 weeks. So everyone who's qualified, congratulations. Everyone else in the 2 and 1 win bracket will still have to be playing. Well, I mean, the 3-win bracket will still be playing, but their games won't matter very much at all. So Kather versus I Know Life. This one was 1-3 games, with Kather winning in 3. I Know Life took NU. I think kind of what we expected. Kather played very solid. GXC versus Gray. GXC won very convincingly. Luthier versus Sabo went to 3 games. I believe Luthier losing Ubers uh, and winning the other 2. But he played very well in all 3 games. I think the Ubers game was maybe a little bit questionable, but Saba played well in that. I have heard that Saba has been locking Ubers, so that is kind of an interesting thing because I don't think that many players have been playing much Ubers recently. A lot of people have been complaining about the meta being kind of stale. Hellray qualified with 3 wins over Not and Hacker. He played pretty cleanly in this as well, kind of what I expected from him. I think actually though that this one was probably the most worrying of the 3-win players. Both Hellray and Team Charm still have like relatively questionable team choices with either heavily relying on HO, which isn't always the best strategy, especially in when you have like forward prep. If you can't diversify your team selection and you end up being predictable, a lot of those HO teams, unless there's a lot of broken mods in the tier like NU is right now, and I think NU is kind of fixing their issue with some of the bans that are happening this week, but um, with a lot of those, unless you have some of those like really broken mons in the tier, you probably won't be able to continually abuse mons or like continually use HO and try to abuse it. And some of their like more balance oriented teams tend to have like major weaknesses to either common mons or common combos or lack a unifying win condition. However, Hellray did qualify. Non-Hacker also looked not bad in his matchup, so we'll be looking forward to, or I'll be looking forward to how he does in the next round. Star Real won very convincingly in 2 games over APW. He played very well, so he's qualified. Sensei Axu won over MJ. This one was, I think, Axu basically played very cleanly, had very good team selection versus MJ. And MJ did win in OU relatively convincingly, but Axu took the other 2 pretty cleanly. Team Charm qualified with 3 wins. Congratulations to him. Once again, basically, the big thing about this is moving forward, he's going to have to be able to move away from just using Cheese. He did actually win his game versus Luthier already in this next week. However, since that game doesn't matter, I'm not going to put too much weight on it. He did bring a lot of cheese, and he got kind of lucky in the LC game. But yeah, it's more so telling about team selection. I don't know how he's going to plan to move forward in the bracket stage and what kind of teams he will be looking for, but it will be kind of interesting for his opponents to try to figure that out. Civicon beat Gilgamesh 9. He did play very cleanly, and um, kind of as I talked about before, Gilgamesh 9 does, or Omega Dude DI does have, has shown kind of both sides of being like very good at points and playing very cleanly and making kind of over aggressive plays at times as well. He did get called out by Civicon, who played very safe in the early game and managed to catch one of those more aggressive plays and won that game very cleanly and took the series. Seis XV beat Skipcan very convincingly. Even in, I believe, PU, which was the tier that Skipcan ended up locking, it was a relatively convincing game. I don't know how bad the matchup was, but honestly, like you can't really make matchup excuses if you pick the tier that you're specializing in. So, like, yeah, like it may have been bad matchup, but that's partially on you as well. My game versus Dragon 246. If you missed that and wanted to see it, you can see it on my channel. It is like the most recent uploaded video. And we played, I believe, OU and LC in that series. I don't think we got to play our PU matchup. And they were pretty convincing games, in my opinion. And then Roxy versus Blink Boy. Blink Boy took those games very solidly. HYS also played very well. It went to 3 games, but it does kind of reaffirm my faith in him, having only lost to GXC up until this point. 52 Gambit also won um, in 3 games versus Maki. Pote took that series very cleanly. Not bolded here, but Pokeart did win versus Shadow Monster with a little bit of luck in the OU game. Real Surfy Team lost in a relatively convincing fashion, which is a little bit worrying for the future. And then Balor won versus Sets with also quite a few cheese. I believe NU and OU he brought Hyper Offense teams, but did play well and managed to win in that set. Rajat Shoot versus Hangwini. Hangwini actually dropped out. Banjo dropped out after the series, but Raj did play very well, and he is now in the 2-1 bracket along after like losing week 1 to MJ. So he's going to be somebody to look out for moving into the bracket stage as somebody who is likely to qualify. Decam handily beat Tote, which was relatively expected, but Decam did look pretty clean in that set. The Green Roman played very cleanly in his set versus ETHEY. Once again, though, some of the team selection here was a little bit more suspect. I think this week was probably the worst offender from the teams I've seen, and that might be partially because people want to be more creative. It's maybe partially because I'm getting more familiar with some of the metas and being able to spot some of those team weaknesses. But I've seen a lot of teams that have like quite significant weaknesses to a lot of common meta threats, which is like relatively worrying. So for I mean, obviously, um, obviously like the metas are like very hard to um, predict and stuff, and sometimes uh, like preparing for a full TLT set may be kind of stressful. So I kind of understand from that perspective, and you can't like really bring all the best teams every week, but just general trends do matter. Richard Pepper brought like lots of HO this week, beat Angels and Airwaves pretty handily actually, which was good on him. It was a very good win, moving into the 2-win bracket. And then Fat Fighter over Kabila Pak. This was also one of the more worrying games. I believe there was an Ubers game here where I think Kabila Pak was the one who didn't bring solid answers to a lot of common meta threats. I think they didn't have like a Calyrex check, or It was either they didn't have a Calyrex check or they didn't have like a Kyogre check or something like that, where they basically auto lost the game in preview. And that's kind of why I think a lot of people are saying that they don't like Ubers, because Ubers currently has a lot of issues with the fact that they can't, or you can't really deal with, or like Calyrex and Zacian are both extremely hard to deal with, alongside a lot of other threats that like can be very difficult to deal with, like including but not limited to like Xerneas, Kyogre, and like a lot of these other Pokemon that like exist within the meta and can very much limit how you play the game. So because of that, they tend to not have many. There's not much room for creativity. I also did see like a Life Orb Ho this week. I don't remember exactly who brought it, but yeah, that's really bad. Don't do that, please. I mean, Ho now that boots are out, Ho is much more of a prominent defensive threat. Life Orb is like just not worth the risk. Like if you want to run like an adamant Ho with like more offensive investment, then go for it. But still try to run boots because they like like being able to ignore rocks is just so huge for a Pokemon like Ho with Regenerator and stuff. But yeah. I'm not really gonna, or well, I guess like some of these 2-win or 0-win brackets, like not too interesting stuff. McCoy and Helamon winning and Ronman and Alternative winning. Nothing too special here. Like not much to be expected of the 0-2 players. Um, and I don't really see a lot of them getting too far. Um, None of them like really stood out as like somebody who can make it to the bracket stage or can because you do need 3 wins in a row from this point. And anyone who lost from here, so like Hoopa, Get Lucky, Geove, and Atiman are now like out of the tournament. So I won't be predicting these 0-3 matchups for that reason. The 3-0 matchups I'll predict, but keep in mind that these ones don't really matter very much. So like Kather versus Let's Rumble, shall we? I think Kather is a better player, but once again, since these matchups don't um, matter very much, I should say, um, you're basically playing for seeding, which like in this case, like I don't think seeding matters very much because I don't think the players will be ordered in the order that they actually are like the best at or sorry they aren't in the order that they are skill wise. So like Kather versus Let's Rumble, shall we? I think Kather is better than Hellray, but yeah, once again this one will come down more to like if I was like in the 3-0 bracket right now, I would probably, or like if I was in the 3-1 bracket, I would probably be looking to not reveal my teams rather than um, so I would be bringing stuff that like either throws people off their track, like bringing, for example, like I could potentially try bring like hard stall, or just completely go meme and bring like a lot of random stuff that doesn't like make any sense, so that it doesn't really like help my opponents in the bracket stage be able to actually understand kind of my play style. That said, Kather versus Les Rumble Shop, I would favor Kather. GXC versus Sensei Axu, I would favor GXC, but for this reason, I think Sensei Axu is like pretty close to GXC, and if GXC does take the route that I mentioned earlier, where he tries to hide his teams and stuff, I do think Sensei Axu is like more than capable of being able to beat him if he doesn't like bring his A game. Starreal versus Siphicon. I think Starreal is better here. He has had a very good TLTs up until now, having like pretty good performances against every opponent, albeit that his opponents haven't been, the S tier opponents yet. Like he hasn't played against like the GXCs or Sensei Axus and those kind of players, but he still has had a really good showing so far. Now moving on, Green Roman versus Seis. I think Seis had a really good showing last week, proving to me that he can play at a high level if he's given the correct resources, and he brought pretty solid teams. So I do think that he is slightly better here than Roman, who, while he did have a good performance last week, still had kind of shaky team selection. Although I did say that his team selection had been good in weeks 1 and 2, I do think Seis has had overall better team selection. And based on this round 3, based on round 3, I do think Seis had a better performance overall. I won't be protecting on my own match for obvious reasons. Failures versus 52 Gambits. I think this one will be kind of interesting. Both players, I think, have had up and down tournaments up until this point. I do think Gambit did play pretty cleanly in their last matchup in round 3. So I will be favoring 52 Gambit slightly here, but this one is really close, like 55-45. Prince of All Tacos versus HYS, definitely the highlight matchup of this week, being a matchup that both matters and is sensitive in the 2-1 bracket, and with two relatively high-profile players, with Pote and HYS both being players that are definitely going to be favored to make it into the elimination bracket. But because this is a 2-1 in the 2-1 bracket, one of them will be forced to play in week 5 in basically an elimination game. That said, I do think HYS is a little bit worse than Poach, but I think this one will be very, very close at like 51-49 in Poach's favor. Moving on, Not in Hacker versus PokeArt 2004. I think Not in Hacker had an overall better showing in week 2, albeit versus, in week 3, albeit versus a slightly weaker opponent in Hellray as opposed to PokeArt playing Star Real. I do think that non-hacker is probably a little bit better here, but I think this one is relative. Wait, PokeR did play Star Real, right? Just to make sure. No. Wait, who did PokeR play? Oh, PokeR played Shadow Monster. Wait, okay, so I'm mixing things up. In that case, I'll say that non-hacker is. I would still favor him slightly here. PokeArt's team that they brought in OU was relatively flawed in my opinion. I think that they had a lot of weaknesses to a lot of common mons, namely Urshifu. The team that they brought had absolutely no Urshifu check other than basically hoping to burn with Flame Body on Moltres, and that's really not a reliable way of winning a game. So if you bring like Urshifu plus a solid defensive core, which is actually a very common like style of OU team, then you basically just auto lose. And so that kind of thing where I can see like a common team building weakness to like a very common one, which is like I would say Urshifu is probably the number 1 meta threat right now, being a mon that you need to have a game plan against for sure, whether that be like okay, there's like soft game plan answers where you just have something like a Clefable to answer it, or you like ideally you kind of have like a hard answer to it where you have something like Clefable plus Toxapex or like Toxapex plus Mandibuzz or something. And in those cases, then you basically can answer it relatively consistently. But you also need to have kind of a plan versus Urshifu plus Future Sight in a lot of cases as well. I've been playing a lot of OU, so this is kind of just some ramblings about that. But yeah, you have to do like kind of this is kind of like a microcosm, I guess, but like or kind of like a specific case, I guess. But like in general, you like being able to be prepared for the biggest meta threats because like in general in Gen 8, because there's so many Pokemon, you won't be able to answer everything. You'll often have some sort of weakness, but like if you have some playing ability around those mons, then that's good enough. Like even if your matchup is like 70-30 against like specific mons, like if you can't answer, like let's say you can't answer Latias in UU, that's a huge issue because Latias is one of the best Pokemon. But if you can't answer, say, like Poltegeist, but you have like some sort of matchup versus Poltegeist, like you can kind of pivot around it and use Toxic, but you're going to lose most of the time if you do play against it. That's fine, but because Poltegeist isn't common. But like that's just a random mon and a random example, right? But the point is that if you have to be able to beat at least the most common meta threats, and then if you can't beat some of the like the lower tier meta threats or mons that are less common, that's like okay. But like if you can't beat the common stuff, then you're probably going to lose a lot of games just based on matchup, which obviously you don't want to be doing. So I Know Life versus 7U912. I'm still gonna go with I Know Life here, who while they did lose last round versus Kather, did have a pretty good showing, did win NU and try to keep it competitive in a lot of the other games. So I'll favor them here as somebody who I still have a lot of faith in going forward. I'm Just Gray versus Balor. This one's gonna be tough for Balor. Although I'm Just Gray did come off a really tough loss versus GXC. Coming off a tough loss against GXC is really um, not that big of a deal because GXC is really, really good. And like some of his other opponents that he did beat are still like in this X1 bracket. So including, well, okay, of course, I'm Just Gray himself, but also like HYS, who he played in round one. So like just losing to GXC, I think as somebody who is probably the second or the best player or the second best player in the tournament in TLT format, I would definitely say that GXC is somebody who like just because you lost to doesn't really like mean a stain on your record. Um, so because of that, I don't really see this as too much of a downside. I do think Balor, uh, you know, has had not the most solid team selection up until this point. And I think, despite like I've kind of ragged on him a little bit, but he has done a good job to get to the 2-1 bracket. So I won't say he's definitely out in this one, but I'm Just Gray should be better here. It'll be kind of close though. Probably like 60-40 in Gray's favor. Saba versus Ars9. Ars9 hasn't had really real matches for a lot of the games. I believe he's gotten 2 buys, and Saba has played very well up until this point. Even in the Luthier game or the Luthier set, he did keep it pretty competitive. So I will favor Saba here, like 60-40, with Ars9 having only shown like a loss up until this point. Raj Shoot versus APW is probably also one of the big matches of this week. Once again, 2-1 bracket. So like these games matter a lot, and both players have shown really good sides as well as really mediocre sides in some of their losses. I do think Raj is probably a little bit better with his more recent showings, but I do think APW is probably better like as an overall player. I do think that this one will probably be one of the closest matchups of this week, and I'll favor Raj like slightly based on recent performance, like 51-49. MJ versus Decam, also something to really, really look out for. Another like top player versus top player kind of deal, where I believe, well, okay, MJ, while he's had good showings so far this TLT, in his loss to Sensei Axie, he had a really good showing in OU. In the other 2 tiers, though, he wasn't that good. I think Deckham's strengths also lie in a very similar vein, where he's going to be good in OU and solid in a lot of other tiers. I do think MJ is better at OU, so I will favor MJ here. I do think it's going to be really close, though, so I'll favor MJ 51-49 here. Cheese versus Richard Pepper. I think Cheese is much better here, 60-40, 65-35 actually. I think Cheese is just much better. Omega Dude DI versus Fat Fighter 2. I think Omega Dude DI is better here, 60-40. Maki versus McCoy. I think Maki is just much better here. While McCoy did win last round, I don't think they are that good of a player overall, so Maki is just better here, 60-40. Tote versus Halamon. I think Tote has had a better BLT or TLT up until this point, and Tote should win this pretty cleanly. And I'll favor them 60-40. ETH EY versus Roxy will probably be one of the most interesting matchups in the 1-2 bracket. I think ETH EY hasn't had that good showings so far, but neither has Roxy, having lost to having not played that well overall. I do think ETHUY probably is slightly favored here at like about 51-49 though. This one will be probably the closest of the 1-2 inside the 1-2 bracket though. Skipcan versus Lethal Hobo. I think Skipcan is better as an overall player. I haven't seen much of anything from Lethal Hobo so far, so I can't really comment. I believe they got buyed last round to get to the 1-1 column. I hope to see more from Stipcan, who's had kind of a relatively disappointing TLT up until this point, but we'll see how he does in this matchup. But I'll favor him here slightly. Thunderbirds versus Sets. I think Thunderbirds is slightly better. Both players didn't have that good showings last week, but Thunderbirds at least took a game off of a pretty good player in, I believe, HYS last week. Yeah, and Sets played against like a weaker opponent and also didn't do that well. So Thunderbirds will be slightly favored here, but I'll be honest, I didn't pay that close attention to these guys' sets, so I may be kind of wrong on this one. Lugia Numair versus Mr. Do Too Much. Lugia Numair did not play last week because he got a bye from the O2 bracket. Mr. Do Too Much didn't play very well versus Pote though, so this one will be kind of interesting. I do think Lugia Numair should be able to bounce back after his like rough early start, but we'll see how this matchup goes. I'll favor him slightly though, like 50 to 48. Shadow Monster had a really rough matchup versus PokeArt this week, and if they can continue to maintain motivation throughout the course of this week, I do think that they should still be favored. What I liked about Shadow Monster is that their team selection was very good, but their play was like sometimes a little bit suboptimal. Like there were some team building mistakes, but that was more so this like what you got past and less to do with like the mons and the team composition. That said, Vamshi didn't play last week, I believe. They got a bye. Just making sure. Yeah, they got a bye. So I haven't seen that much from them. I don't really know how good they are, but Shadow Monster should be able to take this if he plays cleanly. Angels and Airwaves versus Dragon 246. I think Angels and Airwaves is much better here. Probably like 60-40. And Kabila Pak versus Alternif. This will be kind of interesting. I think this one is also somewhat close, but I think Kabila Pak is probably slightly better here. If they can like bring good teams, I think they can play well enough to win this one, probably around 55-45 or so. So yeah, that's about it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. I think like a lot of the matchups like in the 1-2 bracket are like the lower brackets I tend to get more wrong because it's filled with players that I have less understanding of them because they're either people that I've only like basically they're mostly full of people who I only know through TLT or Tours Room tournaments and stuff. Whereas a lot of these top players I have like a general idea of their skill either because they've been playing in Tours Room tournaments for a long time or because I've seen them perform, like how they perform in other Smogon tours throughout the site, like for example Luthier and Kather, and a lot of these other guys at the top, like APW and Sabo, who've been around for a while. So yeah, I apologize if I do get your predictions wrong or if I wrongly label you because just like I guess like kind of obviously I'm not the end all be all for information. I did hear a little bit about like rumblings about people kind of being a little bit upset. But obviously these predictions are all in good fun and kind of just to provide people with entertainment that they can consume. They can be happy about it. They can be mad at me for whatever reason. I mean, I'm willing to shoulder some of that responsibility for being wrong. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. And if you didn't, then I'm not sure why you're still watching, to be honest. But yeah, I hope to see you guys next or later this week for the actual live match. If you are still around and you want to hear more or watch more content, I'll be streaming on Twitch this Tuesday with more Pokemon Reborn stuff. And other than that, I'll see you guys in the next TLT recap and analysis. Thank you guys for watching.